Hi students, today what we're going to talk about is the Theory of Knowledge title for November 2020. That is that the process of gaining knowledge is more valuable than reaching an end result. Discuss this claim with reference to two areas of knowledge. What I'm going to do in this tutorial is that I'm going to break down the title and give you some suggestions and tips for how you might approach this title if you would like to do it for your essay. Before beginning to unpack the title in detail, it's important to identify and understand the key words in the title. Here are a couple that I identified: process, valuable, and end result. Process could refer to an active procedure, the methodology, but when I began to unpack this title, I thought about, well, does that need to be structured? Could a process be trial and error? It also assumes that knowledge continues to develop, so there is a trade-off with an end result. So we have this idea that process is all around, it's continuous, it's always developing. Always questing for knowledge detracts maybe from the eventual resolution, and the exploration, inquiry, and nature of the process determines its value. You can also think about maybe a potential question could be, does this process have to be linear? Could it be in stops and starts? Could something pick up and then finish, or draw to an end and then reopen again? Could it be a circular process in which you come back to the same point? Valuable could be dependent on who decides, but you can think about maybe being based on accuracy and utility, how we can use that particular knowledge. An end result, if it exists, okay, this is an assumption that in this title that an end result does exist in gaining knowledge, could refer to the result itself or a particular product. You can think about end results as providing a future for further knowledge, but maybe it's worth arguing and challenging the idea that if there's an end result in itself. Some potential knowledge questions that I thought about when developing and thinking about this title are listed on the slide, and you can read through them. When I get to my essay plan at the very bottom, you can see that how I've used some of these knowledge questions to frame my essay. Remember that your essay needs a central knowledge question which is drawn from the title. And then you need probably at least one sub-knowledge question in each development to kind of frame your ideas. So I began my unpacking by talking about the knowledge processes, and these are the areas of knowledge in which I'm going to investigate. You should try, the question states that you need two areas of knowledge, and you should try to pick to your strengths, pick the subjects that you already do. So I thought about it in terms of natural sciences, processes outlined in scientific methodology, and is used, they use peer review to validate. I also found this interesting quote from Isaac Newton, where we can see that he states that if I have seen further is by standing on the shoulders of giants. So this idea that process is continual and that it is based on shared knowledge, and the gaining of knowledge by the future is based on this process. So that kind of challenged that idea that there's ever an end result. Okay, if we are always continuing to develop knowledge, then how can there be ever an end result? At times, process maybe is streamlined, is cut short, bypassed maybe, or we maybe have results that are accidental. Serendipitous discoveries are an example of this. And I gave the example here of the microwave. You can click on the link and it might give you some suggestions about how you can go and find some other accidental discoveries. But you can think about, well, is there still a process in these discoveries? Did it still require them to be investigating and looking for knowledge? Ian Fleming is a good example with his discovery of penicillin, but if he hadn't been in the process of trying to gain knowledge, then would he have, happen chanced, stumbled across penicillin in the first place? It's an interesting question, an interesting debate to maybe open up and have a think about how you could use that in your essay. For history, we've got similar to the natural sciences, in the end result will not be regarded as legitimate, the same kind of peer review process that we see in the natural sciences, if the process is not carried out according to the methodology. And the methodology of history is interesting because it's what we assume historians to be. We want them to be objective. We want them to be a balance. We want them to present a version of the past which is as accurate as possible. Conversely, if the history process is carried out continually, indefinitely maybe, then no real argument can be developed, okay? And maybe history will go unwritten. If we continue just to question, how can we ever know what actually happened? An example of this idea of questioning historians and questioning their legitimacy and their process is David Irving. And you can think about the history on trial. Some good suggestions there for potential real life situations that you could use in your own essay. For maths, the process is strictly ordered. It's a sequential process where the end result is the final proof. But however, conversely in maths, we also have theorems, okay, that are no end, okay, still debatable, and application may result in a variety of results. You think about George Cantor, who came up with the theory of rational numbers, okay, and the statistical process that goes on with analyzing numbers. So you can use that. He never really was that successful, but his theorem is used by later mathematicians to explain the process. So you think about, okay, well, is that an endpoint? Can it be regarded as an endpoint? Can theorem be, does it show that a finality has actually come to that, or is it just the beginning of a whole new process? In the arts, I found this idea of process really interesting because in some artistic movements, the end result is the process itself. And you can see that in action painting. And I'd recommend that you have a look at these 4 artists here. Might give you some suggestions about what action painting means. This means that the creation is the whole purpose, is the end result, is this idea of the painting itself. Artistic convention obviously underpins variation. Okay, Picasso is known for being the most influential in the modern world as an artist. He pioneered Cubism, which spawned these whole range of other artistic movements, Futurism, data constructivism, but he was an expert in classical styles and Renaissance art. And this allowed him to resemble and use collage. So you can think about his end results are based on the process that have become before him. So process and knowledge of that process is very important in getting to your future end result. When connecting it to the knowledge framework, I thought about it with regards to scope and application, and this could be a connection to your personal application within the IB. As students of the IB, you undergo the EE process, which requires you to reflect on your own methodology, identify valid research, okay? Normally you judge this based on peer review and encourages you to develop the skills of a lifelong learner. Lifelong learner means that the process is never ending. The process just continues. There is no end result to your knowledge and your development. Within the scope of the human science, it's important to consider the ethical implications of the study. Could be stopping the process. Is it still considered to be an end result? We've looked at this example in class being Zimbardo's prison experiment, where the process of gaining knowledge, even though it didn't actually end up with an end result, was vital in changing future experiments. So maybe that could be a real life situation that you could use if you wanted to explore that element further. For methodology, language, and concepts, I came up with a couple of questions here. So when should rigor be streamlined? Should we cut trials to short to solve problems and possibly reach faster results? You think about, okay, well, how could this maybe affect the validity and reliability of the end result, okay, if that depends on the process? So is it important maybe in medicine, if we have, global pandemic, okay, should we try to make sure that we get a vaccine out as quickly as possible and streamline the rigor of results in order to make sure that we get the process as quickly as possible to reach the end result. But what happens if it goes wrong? What happens if it's not valid? What happens if it doesn't work? There's a variety of different methodologies within different AOKs, okay? And you can see them listed there. This question obviously is catered towards talking about methodology because it mentions process in the title. And you can think about, well, what are some limitations of not keeping to the process? You could be disregarded, knowledge could be disputed, or it could be challenged. For historical developments, obviously this is the idea of this end result, and you can question the whole title itself and saying, well, does an end result exist? Is knowledge always developing? Okay, even in history where it's looking at the past, okay, maybe that might not be considered static because we have historical revisionism, okay, this reinterpretation, this constant reflection and reevaluation of the past and of the arguments that have come out about the past. And who determines the end? That could be an interesting question for you to have a look at. Okay, in some cases, the process is used as a tool to identify the end, and you must assume that the process is used to previous knowledge is useful for current exploration. So this is the idea of we build on the knowledge that has come before us. What happens when previous processes lead you astray? Okay, maybe misdiagnosis. So links to personal knowledge. What happens if I give up? Did I still gain something in the process? So, an interesting example could be looking at human nature and New Year's resolutions. And it doesn't matter who the knowledge is valuable to. If the process is still carried out, but if the knowledge isn't valuable, then is it worth doing the process at all? And does the purpose of the pursuit of knowledge affect its value as well? Could be a potential thing. So that might increase the importance of the process. If the purpose of carrying out the process is vital, then it might necessarily be more important, more valuable than the end result. So there's a variety of different perspectives that you can have a look at. Who decides the end result? You can look at the role of authority in specifying the process and judging the value and determining the end. But the value depends on the type of knowledge being produced. If the knowledge needs to be applied, it must reach an end result. For instance, you can see this in the natural sciences. However, process, discussion, debate, challenge, contradiction for some topics might be adequate. We see this in history. Sometimes it's good just to debate and challenge and identify a varying different interpretations. Some pitfalls to avoid when looking at this title could be this idea of the journey versus the destination. This is a bit too simplistic, I think, and is a little bit of a deductive approach. The title obviously sets you up for a decision which needs to be made between, okay, do we have process on one end that is the most valuable, or do we have end result in another? Although you need to formulate an argument in relation to the title, I wouldn't necessarily just strip it all the way back into journey or destination. What you might also find difficult is if you choose natural sciences and the human sciences, because it might be really difficult to contrast those two because they're quite similar in terms of their methodology. If you did only focus on methodology, then you might have a bit of a narrow discussion. Remember, you should be showing the wealth of your knowledge of theory. So you need to be talking about knowledge framework, the different ways of knowing that also play a role. And the question specifies 2 areas of knowledge. You do not need to do more. Okay, and you should, if you have got more ideas, try to expand on them and explain them and evaluate them more. Okay, as opposed to showing all the different AOKs. And you need to make sure that you define value and end result in the introduction, and that you continually debate these throughout, and you're coming back to them and really coming back to those key points as you go through, and making sure that you have the same consistent definition, that you're not changing the goalposts all the time. Okay, well, this is what value is and this is what end result is. You need to make sure that you stick to the definitions that are in your introduction. So I have 2 example essay plans for you to have a look at, okay, of how I thought about approaching the topic. These are suggestions. They're by no means perfect, but it hopefully gives you some ideas of how you could potentially approach this essay. So for my central knowledge question, I came up with the idea that under what circumstances is the end result just the beginning of a new search? My thesis statement, you can see here, circumstances in which serendipitous discoveries emerge still rely on aspects of the process in order to find their end result. Therefore, ultimately, process of greater value as it forms the basis for methodology and ensures the continuation of the cycle of knowledge. So this idea that process is the most important, okay? It's the basis of methodology, and it continues that knowledge is continuing to be found. It does form the basis for new searches. I looked at 2 different developments that are one's based on history and one's based on natural sciences, and I drew 2 kind of sub-knowledge questions from my broader central knowledge question. So what role does methodology play in determining the end result? And then to what extent is new knowledge spawned from established knowledge? So you should be able to see a clear link back to the title from those 2 sub-knowledge questions. I've really clearly identified my claim and counterclaim, and then you can use maybe any of the examples that I looked at as real-life situations. Most important, you need to make sure that you track your argument throughout and link back to the title. So the value of the process maybe could be overstated, even in AOKs which require strict adherence to the methodology. At times, imagination, this idea of accidental serendipitous discoveries, not based on the process of prior knowledge, can result in the development of original, unique ideas that maybe no one has ever thought about. Despite this knowledge developed outside of process, the process still holds value in establishing grounding methodology from which knowledge can be developed. So it still is more valuable because it ties everything back to the same methodology, and that legitimizes it, validates it, and makes it reliable. The next example essay plan shows that you can write your TOK essay in any way in which you want. What you need to show is that in different perspectives, and you need to show that you're able to challenge and evaluate the title. So in my last essay plan, I looked at it in terms of 2 developments, each with a focus on one AOK and then another AOK. In this one, I've provided a claim in one, and then the counterclaim is from a different area of knowledge. So my central knowledge question is, to what extent does authority control the process and the determination of the end results? My thesis statement: authorities control the process of knowledge leads to credible, certified, trustworthy end results. However, by challenging the process, the scope of knowledge is broadened, resulting in a varied, nuanced, and personal end results. So I've kind of got the idea that the end result is more important in this one, different to my last essay. Then I've looked at the 2 kind of sub-knowledge questions. How important is methodology in different AOKs, and what role does authority play in determining the validity of the end result? And you can see that for my claim, I've got one from the arts and one from history, and then my counterclaims are from the different AOKs there. It does not matter the way in which you structure your essay. You need to make sure that you have a rich discussion of knowledge and that the title is the main focus. So I thought about that, okay, authority can be valuable in initially providing a structured process. However, knowledge which challenges the status may create unique end results which are more valuable in progressing the field. So this idea of that the end result might be necessarily more valuable. For authority, process is vital. However, if opposed, may result in repetitive endpoints. Okay, this can be maybe a bit of a circular process in which we don't really see any new knowledge or knowledge that is kind of breaks barriers being created. So that's my unpacking. I hope that gives you a bit of a chance to have a think about your own ideas and think about maybe how I could use some of these ideas in your own essay. I look forward to seeing what you guys come up with, and if you have any questions, feel free to get in touch.